Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2025 election for governor in New Jersey. I'll be looking at some of the polling data that's come out within the past week or so, and it's notably shifted a little bit in favor of Mikey Sherrill, the Democrat. So I wanted to give you all an update on this race and talk about where I think we are, as it is a little more than 2 weeks to go until election day. So let's begin by having a look at the latest poll, which I think really surprised a lot of people. It was from GQR, which is a nonpartisan pollster. It's a decent poll. Isn't maybe as known as some other polls, right? Like it's certainly no WAPO or NYT. And it's not a big college poll like we get out of Monmouth or Marist, even Emerson to a lesser extent. But it's a solid poll, and it showed Cheryl up by 12, which would be a pretty decisive victory for her. It would be a 6% overperformance of Kamala Harris, and it would be I would think, a pretty good result for Democrats. Now, before we look at this poll and some of the other polls that have come out recently, I think in general this is a pretty difficult race for Democrats. I don't mean that to say that I think they're underdogs, because they probably are still not. But there are a couple of issues with just the general state of play for Democrats in New Jersey, and these issues were very reflected last year, where Kamala Harris did a full 10% worse than Joe Biden. Right, it was a 6% margin after Biden won it by 16 in 2020. The first issue that Democrats face in New Jersey is that it's been a blue state for a while. It's elected Democrats pretty consistently for the past decade. Chris Christie was governor, but it's, since 2017, right, or January 2018, technically, Democrats have held the governorship. So it's been a while. And I think there were few trends that were more clear in 2024 than a revolt against Democratic governance in the deepest of blue states, right? I talk about this every day on this channel, I feel like, but Kamala Harris only did 1.5 points worse than Biden in most of the swing states. Michigan was, not great for her. But if you look at the Rust Belt, you look at Georgia, North Carolina, she only fell a little bit. Wisconsin, she only did about 1 point worse. The differences were pretty marginal. They were significant, don't get me wrong, but they were marginal, right? Go to New Jersey, go to California, she was doing 8 to 10 points worse. New York, she did 9 points worse, I believe, right? Or actually, no, I think she had 11 points worse. It was a little. It was either a little more or a little less than 10%, right? So the issue the Democrats have in these states is that they're perceived as being incompetent governors, and that was really hammered, I think, effectively by Trump in 2024, and it resulted in I would say, pretty anemic turnout in the cities where Democrats usually do quite well. And it also resulted in just pure persuasion loss, right? We look like empirically, if you compare, especially in the bluest of areas within these blue states, turnout did drop a lot compared to 2020 or even especially the Obama years. But there were also people who voted for Joe Biden who just voted for Donald Trump in 2024. There were people who switched their votes. And so in New Jersey, there was a few places better examples of that than Newark, where Kamala Harris did really poorly with Hispanic voters, with Black voters, and with Asian voters, as well as white voters, especially white working class voters in these cities. And I think Democrats, I've said this since January, do not have a solution to that problem, right? Trump might be unpopular. We'll see how the exit polls look. Trump might give Democrats a higher floor in the midterms because they're out of, Democrats are out of power, and, generally political gravity favors the party out of power in elections that are not presidential elections, right? In midterms and off-year elections, the party out of power does better. We know that. But the fundamental issue here is the Democrats don't have an identity, and I don't think that they've been able to gain an identity. They've had, it's been Trump's in office for nearly 10 months. They still don't have, I think, more of an identity than they did on January 20th. And that's a real problem, because it's not enough to just oppose Trump. It can help you, and it can give you a floor, but there's still no identity for this party. And that is a problem. And, this is more of a kind of like normative thing than it is necessarily like an empirical thing that I can, back up with specific data. But I think we're going to see in 2 weeks that if Democrats do worse than expected, or just don't do that well in general, then, I think that's a telltale sign, because, I don't think that either Jack Ciattarelli or Winsome Earl Sears in Virginia are amazing candidates for Republicans. I don't think they've run the best campaigns. I think they've been fine. I think Chittarelli's been a little better than Winsome Earl Sears, but even he's not, like a star recruit, right? He isn't Tom Keene, okay? But the fact of the matter is, and I'm kind of rambling here, but I'm trying to get my point across. Democrats in New Jersey are uniquely prone to this, kind of apathetic, like voter fatigue, and I don't think that they've fixed that since last year. Because last year, clearly, it cost Kamala Harris 10% of the vote in the state compared to Biden, and I don't know if that's fixed this year. We'll see. I don't think it is. I don't think that Mikey Sherrill has, in terms of the polling we've seen, has kind of begun to make up ground on that, and so that's why I was a little surprised to circle back here. That's why I was surprised when we got this GQR poll that showed her up by 12. Now, a 12-point margin of victory for a Democrat in New Jersey in a race for governor in an off-year election with a Republican president would 5 or 10 years ago would not have been that impressive, okay? Phil Murphy won by about 15 points in 2017, and that was seen as being okay. It was seen as being fine, right? And now times have changed. We see Cheryl's up by 12 in this poll. This would be a really good result for her. I would definitely argue that. It would be good for Democrats. It would be a 6% overperformance of Kamala Harris. And like I've said, in a state with challenging dynamics for Democrats where they're uniquely unpopular because they've been governing there for so long, based on what we saw in 2024, that could be another unique problem, right? So that makes these results all the more impressive. And so in general, while I do think that Democrats have, a structural disadvantage, this is still a race they should win, and that's what I want to get across, right? We can, talk about the complexities of New Jersey and the fact that it's a right-trending state and the fact that Republicans, have been able to really capitalize on a lot of trends here in the past 3 to 4 years. But this is still a state that Kamala Harris won. This is not, Pennsylvania, where it's an even to Trump-leaning state. It's certainly not, West Virginia or Ohio or Kentucky. It's still a blue state. Kamala Harris still carried it by 6%. And at the end of the day, Democrats should be winning this race. And so maybe what we're seeing is a bit of a regression to the mean where, look, even though the Democrats deal with all the challenges that I've outlined in this video in a state like New Jersey, they're still out of power, right? They benefit from that off-year dynamic. And Trump isn't popular, right? Even though Democrats still poll really poorly in most national surveys of in terms of level of identification with the party and in terms of, what percent of people view the party favorably, Democrats still poll really poorly. Trump is also not that popular. Most of these surveys that you look at statewide in New Jersey show him underwater by double digits. Okay, so that could be part of it. Maybe there is a little regression to the mean. Maybe there is, there are people coming home from Mikey Sherrill because they don't like Donald Trump because they want to protest him because he's in office now. And that could be part of it. And then another part of it could be that, generally speaking, candidates that try to kind of make a comeback do a little worse usually, right? So, for example, look at Senate elections, right, where you have it's either a former senator or someone who just who ran and lost, right? Normally they don't do too well. A good example of this is Russ Feingold in Wisconsin. He didn't run for re-election in 2010. He tried to come back in 2016. He lost to Ron Johnson. Evan Bayh, right, in Indiana, tried to make a comeback that same year. He was a former senator from Indiana, was actually quite popular. He lost to Todd Young in 2016. And those are former senators, right? Think about Dean Heller, who was a senator in Nevada. He ran for re-election in 2018. He lost to Jackie Rosen. He then tried to run for governor in 2022. Didn't even make it past the primary, right? So maybe that's part of it. Usually, or in the state of Nevada, Adam Laxalt ran for governor in 2018. He lost. He ran again in 2022 in a more favorable environment. He still lost to Catherine Cortez Masto. So generally speaking, right, candidates that run a second time, once they've already been rejected by voters, is kind of a sour taste in the mouths of the electorate. I think that could be part of it too. So I would say isolated in any given D+6 state, Sherrod by 12 isn't, Democrats winning by 12 isn't that, shocking or crazy. But what I would say is that in New Jersey, Republicans have a good opportunity here just based on the situation at hand in the state where Democrats are uniquely unpopular. And, this is a result that's surprising to me. So overall, those are my thoughts on New Jersey. I think it's important to just follow the polls, right? This is a Democratic internal. It has Sherrod up by 9. Again, the last GOP internal had her up by 3. And what you'll notice is that we've only gotten one poll that shows the race even from NRC. This was at the beginning of the month. And then what was interesting was that we did get a couple of nonpartisan polls that showed a pretty, within 5 or 6 points. Rutgers had a 5-point margin of victory for Mikey Sherrill. Fairleigh Dickinson had it at 7, which is, kind of mid to high single digits. Fox had it Sherrill up by 5. Fox is obviously like a big name pollster. I think when they showed this race close, I was really intrigued by that. Quinnipiac had it at 6. So, we're getting pretty consistent, mid, maybe a little high single digits results here. But at the end of the day, when you take a look at the way that this has been moving, Democrats have a little bit of an advantage here. In this internal poll, it's the last time that Democrats released a poll in Jersey publicly, they're up by 6, they're up by 9 now. And then GQR is a nonpartisan pollster. They're showing movement towards Mikey Sherrill. And so, it's interesting just because I don't think anything's really changed in this race. There was a debate, obviously, but I don't think much has changed. And so I think my best estimate is that if there actually has been movement towards Sherrill, my best guess, I should say, really, is that we're just maybe seeing a little regression towards the mean. Maybe some, disaffected Democrats are coming home for her. They want to protest Trump. They don't want to, give Republicans more momentum, even if they're still mad at Democrats. And so that might be a very, I guess you could say, what's happening. But, we're going to get more polls. We're going to see if this can become a pattern over the course of the next 2 or 3 days. But that's just what I think as of right now. I think this is going to be a really interesting race. It's a very complex race. Again, in 2021, it was really surprising. It was a lot closer than people anticipated because even though Phil Murphy did a little bit better than Joe Biden in some of these cities just because of differential turnout, he did not do well at all in the suburbs or in the rural areas. New Jersey is going to be a state to watch. Absolutely. I'm so excited to see how this race pans out, and I'm going to keep you posted every step of the way. So be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss another one, and I'll see you all next time.